A patient arrives at a clinic carrying a sprawling, incredibly complex life story. But the moment they sit down, the clinical system processes all of that complexity into a rigid, linear sequence. The standard tools of modern psychiatry, diagnostic criteria, risk checklists, and medication histories, are necessary for triage. They provide a vital baseline, yet they operate under a fundamental constraint. As a result, these instruments suffer from dimensional poverty. They map the flat surface of a person's timeline while remaining blind to the high-dimensional geometry of the human mind. This represents a massive failure of representation. A human life simply does not unfold as a series of points on a line. To find a map that is truly adequate to the mind, we have to look toward biology. Specifically, we can look at the spatial reality of protein folding. A linear chain of amino acids possesses no function on its own. It only becomes a working part of a living system when local tensions and environmental bonds force it to fold. It snaps into a functional form only when it enters the third dimension. Psychic events work in this exact same spatial way. They are structural rather than strictly chronological. Our experiences fold across time until two moments that appear distant on a calendar actually physically touch. A childhood trauma or a lost parent sits structurally adjacent to a panic attack happening today. That past is not behind the patient, it is a fold in their current architecture. Understanding a life requires us to stop asking what happened first. We have to look at the topology and ask what touches what. The ancient Greeks modeled this deep descent into the folds of the self through the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus enters the underworld to retrieve his lost love. At the final threshold, he turns, and she vanishes. We can view this backward glance as a clinical reality, the moment the body checks itself because the pressure of the return becomes unbearable. Traditional models treat this kind of loss as a binary. You move from a +1, a living, present figure, down to 0, a total void. But the Orphic gradient reveals a much heavier physics. Profound loss changes sign. It plummets past the baseline into -1, a state of inverse presence. This person is not gone. They remain dynamically active in the field, exerting a massive gravitational pull that organizes the patient's entire folded reality. When a mind is locked in orbit around that negative pull, healing becomes a question of structural integrity. How do we approach that charge without the system shattering? We organize these forces through the emergence equation, a structural grammar mapping the variables of recovery. The numerator tracks emergence potential. G is ground, basic safety. Gamma is reflection, clinician mirroring. Delta S squared is the trauma's raw power. Everything divides by delta C, collapse pressure. This includes shame, exhaustion, and institutional rush. When this denominator grows too large, it shatters the system before return is complete. Healing depends on the balance of these forces. We must secure the ground and lower the pressure before we can safely face the dark. That brings us to the variable H, the harmonic coefficient. The simple act of confronting a trauma doesn't guarantee a result. The quality of that interaction matters. It has a specific resonance. In many clinics, a quiet ward or a compliant patient is celebrated as a success. This is often just H at 0, a state of cancellation where the field has simply been deadened rather than integrated. When the ground and reflection are strong enough, the system achieves generative amplification. It creates a new structure, a way of being that didn't exist before the crisis. Recovery means building the capacity for the mind to resonate with its own history without breaking. This requires a sanctuary, a precision-reduced environment where the brain can safely encounter error and update its oldest, most painful models of the self. This demands a shift in how we listen. Human structures are not best known by being listed. They must be heard. Clinical formulation should function as a folded song. We can never drag a person back to the light exactly as they were before the descent. The underworld changes the traveler. We build enough ground, reflection, and harmonic tolerance so that what was lost can finally find a livable, beautiful form.